And so, what does our nervous system have to do with our digestive healing? This is again another huge conversation, and I'm going to do my best to provide a summation. And again, like as someone who has dived deep into learning so many different modalities, I have spent many, many years looking specifically at the nervous system. And that's because I understood after finishing studying my naturopathy degree, which, I went and studied because I was a skin therapist, and I realized that if I wanted to support skin, I needed to support digestion. I felt like I was blocked from being able to attune to people's specific needs. And I was like, I'm just going to go and do this degree. It's very important to me. And I left that degree, when I finished it, with more questions just about than when I started with, because what I much more deeply understood is that our nervous system is in charge of the digestive system, and our nervous system, as the record keeper of the past, is intimately involved with our belief systems, the lens at which we are looking at the world, with which we hear the world, with which we taste and smell and touch the world. All of our senses are honestly scanning the environment for us the entire time. And so Dr. Stephen Porges had presented the polyvagal theory back in the 70s, and it's something that when I first learned about, I was like, oh God, this makes so much sense. So he coined the term neuroception, which is the scanning of our nervous system, totally unconscious and subconscious to our conscious awareness most of the time, for cues of safety or danger. And of course, humans have a negativity bias. Like, we're always going to be scanning for danger because we want to survive. Our mind body system actually does want us to survive. And yet, what's so interesting is that our nervous system can learn about our response to different events and experiences that we survived and keep us locked in those patterns. And it's not just locked in mental patterns. Our nervous system is also in charge of like the movements of our body. Yeah. Like as I move my hands around, who's doing that? Like which part of me is doing that? My nervous system is listening to the cues that are all being collaborated, in the neural networks of my brain, but also the neural networks of my body. You cannot separate the brain and the body. These things are happening hand in hand. And our brain, there's a lot more storage happening in here, and we have access to different parts of our brain, like different lobes of our brain that contains, more of this information than another type of this information. But what's really interesting about the brain and the digestive system is that most of it, as I mentioned already, is under autonomic control. It's really like these deep parts of our brain stem and certain parts of our brain that are in charge of this, and they are very much related to survival patterns. And unless we have an understanding of how to work with them, we can be stuck in survival patterns that don't give us very much access to our prefrontal cortex. So instead, we're working off imprints and conditioning and behaviors and habits that were often installed in childhood or from our ancestors, instead of being able to access our own creativity, our own innovation, our own impulse control, our own decision-making processes. And so we can literally just be living out the habits of comfort eating, not even recognizing that we're hungry, or not knowing what we're hungry for, or not knowing when we're full, or not being engaged or being able to be present with our food because we're stuck running in the past or running, a million different directions out into the future. Coulda, shoulda, woulda, what if? And so these are all related to what we're thinking, but also to what we're feeling in our body. And so with every cue of danger that our body is experiencing, so whether that is that you're sitting in a place that's got some loud noises going on, and those loud noises are actually triggering a subconscious or unconscious threat response in your body because it reminds you of a previous event or a person, or there's some words being used that are triggering for you. And perhaps it's like an overwhelming sound where you're actually totally capped on your capacity, on your resources for that day, where this extra sound or light coming in is just too much. Like, it's just too much, and you feel pretty exhausted and you just don't want it. And your nervous system is listening to the cues of that, and it's creating a response in your digestive system in kind. So if you're feeling overwhelmed, your digestive system is overwhelmed. If you're worried, your digestive system is worried. If you're ruminating in the past, like really stuck in the past, your digestive system is going to be stuck too. And so it makes sense to me to be able to create some illumination around some of the limiting beliefs and the paradigms and the conditioning that we place upon our receptivity in the way that we're receiving life, the messages that we're receiving, the cues that we're receiving. And we can start intentionally engaging with those cues in some pretty simple but very profound ways. And they're components that I teach in my nervous system course. If you would like to access that, it's available to you. Just jump onto my website. It's 24/7 access. And it is this collaborating, as always, that communication, that forging of a deeper relationship with our body, the somatic signals of our body, when we can understand, oh, whoa, I just tensed up here in this moment. I can feel some contraction or some pain, some tightening, some uncomfortability in my body. How could I become a little bit more present to that? And how could I offer myself a little bit of support or soothing in this moment to create a shift and change through my digestive system so that it can be more receptive to the food that I'm eating right now? Like, is it going to be more important for me to leave this environment? What do I need to do to create a change or a shift in this environment so I feel safer and more held, more receptive? And so we often also have unconscious blocks around receiving. I know this was a huge one for me. Like receiving nurture and nourishment. I didn't actually really feel safe in that because that was what I'd been taught from a really young age, not to trust that that was going to remain stable, or not to trust that that was really true. So how, in what ways could those patterns or patterns similar to that, or patterns that are related to fear, scarcity, lack, when there's senses of guilt or shame that are associated with food, with eating, fears, unconscious fears around the places that you are in for your eating experience, how are all of these things impacting your digestive system? And this is why I, in my journey, have found it really helpful to work alongside with somebody to help me look at those different signs and signals, to help me unpack the different responses of my digestive system that actually could be delayed responses that might not necessarily be happening at the time. And so attuning to your nervous system, to the lens to which you are engaging through your senses with all, like the world around you, with your inner world and your outer world. The other thing about the nervous system and the digestive system is that your nervous system is listening to the cues that are coming from the inside also. If you're placing inflammatory foods, inflammatory for your system, in your mouth and swallowing them into your body, then your nervous system views that as a threat. And you will have a threat response that is initiated from that inflammation that's sitting inside of you. If there's a level of dysbiosis already present, leaky gut, dysbiosis meaning shifts and changes in the populations and communities of the microbiomes that live inside of you that aren't so helpful anymore, that have moved away from your optimal, unique print of microbiome. And so if you have these environments like small intestinal bowel overgrowth or IBS or IBD or bloating or digestive discomfort or gastro like reflux or hiatal hernias, like if you've got different aspects that are currently not optimal in your body, there is actually already an undercurrent internal threat response that your nervous system is listening to. And so again, like how can you create more internal safety in your body, as this is a huge part of your messaging system? So it's not just the external environmental messages, it's the internal messages as well. And so again, this is where I have found that working with somebody else who's got a different set of eyes and ears and understanding and knowledge and wisdom to impart, to help me find those levels of physiological safety. And the more physiological safety that we have, the more biological safety that we have, the more somatic safety that we have, the more that can shift our psychological safety. And so it is the link of as above, so below, as within, so without, physiological and psychological working together. You can't just work on one and not the other and expect to get results. Again, in my practice, in my experience, that's what I found over and over again. with my own journey. And it wasn't until I started really looking at how I can combine these areas of cues of safety inside of me and inside my patients that I started to get into those root cause shifts, the unlearning to relearn. So the unlearning of unsafety is a big thing. The unlearning of threat response is a big thing, so that you can feel and know and become more safe in your own vessel. Yeah. And so the nervous system is a huge component of how the digestive system is working. And this is just a brief introduction because this is a big, big topic. If you look at limiting beliefs and different fears that we may have, and different shames that we may have, and different guilt that we may be carrying, that might not be from our own lived experience. It also could just be held in our DNA, gifted to us from our ancestors for us to heal and transform and transcend in this lifetime. We're so complex. It's so delightful. And there are just so many more layers to the digestive system that I would love to open up your understanding to. So let's continue opening these windows of perspective. And thank you so much for being here with me and listening. And as always, I appreciate and am delighted in your questions, comments, feedback, and your sharing if you found this helpful for you. Thank you.